Chiron in the birth chart is an important indicator for our wounds, vulnerabilities, insecurities, and where we feel a little bit uncomfortable or awkward in our own skin. It also shows us where we can show up to heal other people and to help guide other people through the same difficulties and traumas and experiences that we've been through ourselves. Today, I have with me Jen Kinsella, who is a brilliant professional astrologer. She's also a graduate of the Cosmic Academy of Astrology and one of our teaching assistants. And she's here today to walk us through how to interpret Chiron in the birth chart. And we're going to get a little bit of a taste of the Chiron return, which happens around age 50. Thank you so much, Jen, for being here with us today.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me, Heather.
And so, for those who are not familiar with your work already, give us a little breakdown of how you came to become an astrologer and your background in astrology.
Well, I've always been interested in astrology since I was really young, and I've always learned about it. But when I really got interested in it was when I discovered my moon sign and how that really made me feel like I could really understand myself better, more so than my sun sign even. And then I started to research, learn about it, look up books. But when I discovered your channel and on YouTube and found your Cosmic Academy of Astrology, then I was able to pull all those pieces together that I had been learning and really kind of make sense of it and learn how to read my own birth chart properly and others as well. So then I just became totally obsessed. Moon and Scorpio.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you did because you're such a wonderful asset to all of our students and a brilliant teacher as well. And
Ah,
for those
thanks.
who are interested in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, it is now open for enrollment for 20% off. Super exciting for the entire month of June of 2023. If you're watching this in the future, that might not be the case. So jump on it now. And if you join us today, you'll get 3 bonus astrology courses along with your certification fee waived. So the link for that is down below. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. But before we jump in, Jen, where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work or get a feel for what you do?
So I have a website and everything, all bookings can go through that. It's www.astrosoulalchemy.com. I'm also on Instagram, so you can find me there and get in touch with me there, and on Facebook with Astro Soul Alchemy as well. But yeah, any bookings or there's more information about my background on my website as well. And feel free to email me, and that's astrosoulalchemy@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I'll post all that down below for everyone. And you guys, I highly recommend getting a reading with Jen. She's absolutely brilliant, very detailed, very good at what she does, and gets excellent feedback from all of her clients and all of our students at the Academy. So check that out. And so,
Thanks.
yeah, without further ado, I'm going to make you host so that way you can share your presentation that you have for us today.
Oh,
There we go.
okay. So I will share my presentation. I'm just going to move us over here. I hit present. Okay. So here we go. This is my presentation on Chiron. So what we're going to get into today is what Chiron is and all about it. So first we'll look at the mythology of it because it does very much so apply to how it's interpreted in the birth chart. And then we'll look at what it represents there. And then through the signs and houses, how it may show up for us, how we may experience it, and what areas of life that it affects. And then we'll look at some transits. The biggest one is the Chiron return. And people with Chiron and Aries will be experiencing that currently. So I was going to focus a little bit on that just to give people that may be having this healing journey coming to full cycle, full completion, how that might be affecting them and how they might be experiencing it. Some have already gone through it. So I'll get into it. Okay, so I'm just going to move this over here a little bit. I can't see it there. So Chiron was born as a centaur. So the top half of him was a man and the lower half was a horse. And even at that, he wasn't like the normal centaurs because he had human legs at the front as well. So he wasn't even the same as the centaurs either. So he wasn't like a man and he wasn't like the centaur. So his father was Kronos or Saturn, and his mother was Philyra Asine. I hope I'm saying that properly. And she was really kind of embarrassed by his form and ashamed of him. So um, he was different to humans and he was different to centaurs with his body shape. So she kind of abandoned him and she didn't want to have anything to do with him. So there's the start that we can link this vulnerability in, this wound in, and that's what Chiron is always about, as you mentioned there earlier, Heather. And this made him feel different and vulnerable. So he was adopted by Apollo in the mythology, who cared for him and taught him how to heal in the healing arts. So he was a great healer and he healed people. He used different modalities and he even used astrology as well. So at one point, then he became wounded in another way, physical wound, in his leg by Hercules, by an arrow that he shot into his leg, and he was in constant pain and he couldn't heal himself, even though he was a great healer for others of physical wounds. He couldn't heal himself, so he made a deal with Zeus. In exchange for Prometheus, that he may become mortal, and then he could die, and that would heal or release him from his pain and from his wound. And that was the only way that he could release from that. So that's the mythology of it. And the astronomy of it was that it was first discovered. It wasn't actually discovered till 1977 by Charles Cowell. And again, we have this difference with Chiron. It wasn't a planet, but it also was too big to be an asteroid. So it was different. Again, here's this difference showing up, and it had an unusual orbit, but it did bring about a whole new celestial body, like a whole new celestial object. So it was showing this way forward again. So I think now more than like 1,000 of these centaurs, that's the name of the new celestial object, have been found, and they're similar again in asteroid size, but they're composed like comets, more differentiation and more not fitting in, that kind of thing. So okay, so in the birth chart, then Chiron can show us a place where we're vulnerable. It's an insecurity or a wound that we've developed, and it usually occurs in childhood, but before the completion of the first Saturn return is really kind of any time around, within that space. So it's an area that we can't fully heal for ourselves, similar to the mythology with Chiron. He couldn't heal his wound, but we might be able to help others heal or deal with theirs. Because of our experiences, we can kind of pay that forward in that way. And holistically, Chiron represents the healing journey. So, looking at it overall, it's the journey that we take through life and how it shows up for each one of us. And it's different for everybody. For some people, it can be more predominant, and for others, it may not be so. But it is a cycle, and it's a cycle of experience and pain, our vulnerabilities, and then healing through that and helping others to transform from our experience. And we can give that help to them. And it does what we aim to do is use it to transform us into a place of power in our life. So it has a Plutonian kind of feel to it in that way, like that we can kind of move through, but not maybe as traumatic or as such as a big thing as Pluto's effect. So Martin Lass has a great book on Chiron, and I really liked this quote that he had. Well, I just took this extract from it because it kind of summed it up nicely. And he says, well, to give us just that overall objective look at Chiron, and even though it's hardship, just to give that sense that what we do not see are the benefits, blessings, lessons, and gifts and service of these painful and traumatic experiences, and we fail to see the balancing sides. And I suppose that's when we're deep in those things and when we're going through these, or when we're at the start of the journey. The healing journey then itself consists of discovering and embracing these balancing sides, and that's the act of what we're going through. And then the healing reveals a gift, which is part of the bigger picture of our life's purpose and meaning. So that's where it's leading us to. And I like that idea of it. And he has a great book because he actually explains this in it, like he lays it all out in that way, where we see the wound, how we may approach it, and then the gift that comes from it. So I like that side of it. So I adopted that approach, looking at Chiron's placements through the houses and through the zodiac signs in the chart. And the house in the zodiac sign shows us our vulnerability and imbalance, and it shows us our healing path, and how prominent it is then determines how much of a healing journey that we're on in this lifetime. Like I said earlier, it may be quite prominent or it may not be. But aspects give us an indication of this, and how strong the placement is in the chart. And if you don't know what Chiron looks like in your natal chart, or if you haven't heard of it before, or if you're looking to see how you can see it, if you can you see this pointer? I'm not sure if you can, Heather. But yeah, the symbol here shows us where it is in the chart. So when you're looking at your natal chart, you can look for this symbol and it'll show you where Chiron is placed, which house it's in. And it's important to look at the house and the sign and the degree as well. And we'll get into that in a little while. Okay, so this is kind of covered it up here on me. Sorry about that. So this is can you see the top of this here? Is it kind of
Yeah,
covered up?
everything is perfect and we can see your pointer
Okay.
and all the things.
All right, I can't see the top of it. So Aries, this is Chiron in the placements in the signs. So Aries is the insecurity. It's our wound of self. It's our individuality, and it's also, I'm sorry, I can't see it there now. I'm trying to see what it's supposed to say, but it's the wound of self, and it's can you see the Aries on it, Heather? I just can't see what it
Yeah,
says
it
on it.
says that the gift is sovereignty,
Sovereignty, yeah.
which is
And
very much a Chiron and Aries thing.
yeah, so it's like we have a distrust of ourselves, or we don't feel like we can kind of share our identity properly. And we'll get into Chiron and Aries much more later on. And Taurus is a distrust, a wound of trust, a lack of trust or love, and maybe a loss of security and stability, and that's that wound. Material things as well, not just love or trust. So the gift for that is inner love, trust, and spirituality, and that's what we're aiming to reach. For Gemini, the wound is being unable to communicate or seeming like we're not intelligent. And that's our vulnerability out in the world. And the gift for this is unique expression and intelligence. So that's what comes at the other side of the healing journey. The gift is. For Cancer, the wound is of feeling unlovable or maybe not nurtured. And the gift for this is recognizing the many forms of giving and receiving love, so that we may see that it comes in different ways and it's not just how we may want to experience it. And for Leo, the wound is of stifled talents and creativity. So we're maybe not able to express our talents, or we maybe weren't able to, show our creativity when we were young. And the gift of this is inner child healing, because Leo is very much concerned with that, and the chance to express those gifts and yourself and to shine. For Virgo, the wound is of being incomplete, a need to fix ourselves and feeling dissatisfied. And the gift in this healing is acceptance of self and others as they are, and a sense of oneness and feeling complete. So for Libra, the wound is of loneliness and maybe feeling incomplete without a partner. And the imbalance is in the self with this placement. And the gift is knowing that everything we need is inside of us, and finding balance within that, and balancing it, then that with the outside world, but knowing first who we are and being able to be alone and, feel that sense of self. And for Scorpio, the wound of disconnection or abandonment, maybe a fear of loss or death, and the gift is appreciation of life and love, and knowledge that love isn't lost through death or through loss, and an inner knowing and connection, and knowing that this is the case. And for Sagittarius, the wound is of lack of purpose or wisdom, and the gift is finding innate wisdom and understanding and certainty in the way forward. For Capricorn, the wound of being unappreciated and a lack of structure, and maybe a loss of control. Also, it can be not being recognized or not being appreciated for the work that we've done. That could be another piece of that. And the gift is appreciation of the self and the journey that we take to get there, and having talents at organization and discovery of our life's path is ultimately what we're aiming for with this one. For Aquarius, the wound is of isolation and being different from others. The gift is objectivity, acceptance, and integration of our unique talents, and recognizing that just because we have this uniqueness, this is a gift, and it's not something that we should be feeling ashamed of or vulnerable about. And for Pisces, then, the wound is of a loss of faith in the divine, and maybe fear of being hurt or deceived. And the gift is return to oneness and trusting in other people and accepting love. So that's what it may show up as, and that's only just a skim of the surface. Obviously, there's a lot more to get in depth into these, but this is just to give you an overview and an idea. And
Yeah,
in the
and
houses, then
with the signs too, it should kind of be worth mentioning that Chiron takes several years to go through each zodiac
mhm,
sign, and so every single
yeah,
person who's born under, that Chiron placement isn't necessarily going to have the exact same experience, but those are just kind of general topics and themes.
yeah,
As a starting point, the houses are going to make it way more narrowed down and way more specific, which we're about to get into here. And then if you have planets that are aligned with Chiron in some way, or the angles, which are the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, or IC, align with Chiron in some way, that's going to be like where you're going to get the biggest, most impactful energy. So we're going through this step by step, just so you know, like if that doesn't resonate with you, like you have Chiron and Pisces and that just didn't feel exactly right, it could be because you have Chiron and Pisces with Mars, which would make it more of an Aries type of energy, and all of that. So anyway, let's get into the houses. Sorry for interrupting.
yeah. No, that's a really good point. And the fact that it's a generational energy then as well means that like this could be ranging, because I'm bringing them all up because it's like a 50-year cycle. So
Yeah.
people that had it in Aries are coming full cycle now. So this can be at any age group, and these will, they have it has an irregular orbit, so it spends longer in some signs and a shorter amount of time in others. But so there's a lot of people that'll have it in all those signs. But yeah, like you say, it depends on what else is going on in the chart as to how you experience and feel that. But the houses then are going to show us the area that shows up and where we can kind of experience that. And if it's the first house, it's kind of your identity, your sense of self. It's your vulnerability is within yourself, and how you are with other people, and how you show up in the world and how you show yourself to others. You may have vulnerabilities in your physicality as well. The second house is emotional and material security and values, and these are all going to link back to, like I said, the first instance of this is like within the first 1 to 29 years or whatever. Excuse me. So that's where it's going to show up, and some of it can be like really earlier on. So it could be like that you lacked things, emotional and material security in your early years, when you were younger. Similarly with the third house, it could be early childhood years, communication, siblings. It could be learning difficulties. It could have been a vulnerability in school at that time. And in the fourth house, it could be home, your parents' roots. You might have felt different in your family. It could be just that you felt like you were the odd one out, or something could have happened in that sense. In the fifth house, then it's again, this could be school related too, with regards to maybe, I don't know, secondary school here, that's middle school maybe, or high school in the US. Creativity as well could have been something that you didn't get to experience, and maybe you were too serious. It could also be to do with romance, to do with romantic relationships before you're married, or your sexuality. That could be where you're feeling vulnerable, or you need to express yourself. In the sixth house, obviously, this is not going to be necessarily for younger kids, workplace and colleagues, but that can happen at an older age. But it is, maybe you have poor health as a child, and then you become a gifted healer, later in life. The seventh house, then relationships and marriage obviously wouldn't apply at the younger age either, but it could be that, like, say, you were affected from a divorce or whatever, parents' divorce or separation, or a feeling of being rejected, or a need to find individuality. So these are the places where it may show up in the houses with those signs. And the eighth house then could be a fear of death. It could be spirituality, it could be power, money, and an indicator of psychic abilities, and it could show up in ways like that. The ninth house could be a disconnection to our higher selves and belief systems. There could have been some kind of trauma during travel. We could have had a fright, something could have happened in transit. Or travel on the other side, it could be a healing journey, and you could be a student of life. So that can show up that way, looking at it from the whole cycle. In the 10th house, career, public reputation, and the mark we make on work. That's what that usually represents. That's not really going to be too applicable in early years, but we may fear a lack of recognition for what we've done and try to please people in authority. We could have had a fear of people in authority. Something could have happened in that sense. You might try to prove your self-worth to other people. And in this sense, self-acceptance is what's required over time. In the 11th house, it could be friends, groups, social networks, your hopes and dreams. You might have had difficulty maintaining friends or social groups and may feel different from other people and from our peers. And in the 12th house, then the last one, it's hidden wounds that aren't seen out in the world. So it's more unconscious and it could create self-sabotage, or it might be that you don't want to put yourself out into the world, or you want to hide away and not tell people. There could be secrets, there could be things like that. So, and psychic indicators or psychic gifts are an indicator, and that could be a good expression of that energy, or using like meditation and things like that to work through it. So,
Yeah,
okay.
that's a very good overview of the houses. I've noticed that with the angular houses, so like the first, seventh, 10th, and fourth. I don't know if you've seen this as well, Jen, but it tends to be a way more prominent energy for those people, especially if it's aligned with the angles. And so
Mm-hmm.
their Chiron experience and their Chiron wound becomes way more of a focal point throughout their life. As a result of that, because those houses tend to manifest more materially, more physically, and more overtly overall, and they are kind of foundational houses in our
Yeah.
lives. And so, like with the seventh house, I've seen a lot, like what you've said before, of children of divorce. But those divorces, because like 50% of marriages end in divorce right now, so that could be. It doesn't mean everyone who has Chiron in the seventh house or everyone who's a child of divorce has Chiron in the seventh house. But those particular divorce experiences tend to be way more traumatic and way more dramatic than the average child. Or like in the 10th house, they could be mocked even by somebody who's in a position of power and authority, like a teacher or someone they look up to. And that could have, really long withstanding effects on the way that they present themselves or even on their career because they feel like they're not good enough. Or in the fourth house, feeling like an outcast in your own family and being picked on by your family.
Mm-hmm.
The first house literally can actually sometimes be like physical deformities or looking different in some way and presenting yourself differently, which can be very traumatic in childhood. So those ones tend to show up. I just wanted to point out, like, really, like, this is like a big part of their life story.
Yeah, exactly. And it does affect all the other areas of the chart then as well and of your life. So, like you say, if it's a physical deformity, it could affect their career. It could affect them having a marriage partner. They could have spent more time at home, or they could be more held at home because they can't be out in the world. And, just for that example as well. Yeah, exactly. So those things are much more prominent, for sure in those senses, and that's even without having any other planets or aspects or anything like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Um so yeah, when it like and then bringing that to the aspects, so like when there's a lot of prominent aspects in the chart, it just shows that it's a very important area in life and in the chart that we need to heal, and it's one of the main aims is obviously you consider your ordinal, but one of them is to fulfill this life pattern purpose and shows how our wounds play a part in this evolution and growth. So, obviously the whole chart is holistic and we pull it all together, but that is a big aspect to it. So bringing it to the degree and seeing maybe how we might be able to recognize when these things happen. I learned this from you, obviously, Heather, but it's Robert Phoenix's theory for the age of the Chiron wounding. And it's the degree where Chiron is placed in the house. So, say, for example, if it's at 18 degrees of Aries, which it's currently at, then it could have happened, something could have happened to cause this wound at 18 years of age, or 17 or 19, within that age range. And that's how we can see that. And it's interesting to look at that because a lot of times when you do a reading for people with Chiron and you ask them, well, what, when we look at the house and we look at the sign, And then you say, did anything happen at that age? And then all of a sudden a light bulb moment occurs, and it's like, yeah, that's where that happened. And then things start to fall into place as time goes on, of how this has affected them throughout time. And then you can kind of see where to go with that. And on that note, Lynn Coyner explains Chiron, the placement at the beginning and the later degrees. And there is quite a difference in this. So people with their placement at 0 to 5 degrees are people who feel out of place, and they need to trust their intuition and be the first ones to admit their differences and pave the way for others in new situations. And I feel I understand this placement because my Chiron is at 1 degree. So I understand this in the fact that, and it's in the 10th house. So I mean, obviously, I'm not going to be able to pinpoint the way you could if it was at a later degree, and you can say, well, at this age, this occurred, and now I realize, where it's stemming from. So at 1, I didn't have a career, and I wasn't out in the world. I wasn't trying to develop my legacy or anything like that. So where did it come from? And it's not like you can really find that out so much. So it is a little different in trying to understand then, well, what is happening, or piece that together. It's a little bit more difficult. So it is an intuitive energy in that way, and trying to recognize your differences and put that all together. Whereas the ending degrees are totally different. Then you have, like, say, from 25 to 29 degrees, and they're comfortable with those differences. They're able to express them, and they're here to help other people express their differences and heal their insecurities and move through that. With the analytic degree, the 29th degree in particular, highlighting resolved issues for transformation and healing. So that's really going to kind of be able to express that more so, and a need to do that.
Yeah, and I've seen this more personally with my husband, who has the opposite of you. I believe his Chiron's at 28 degrees, and it's in the 7th house. And so his parents' like divorce experience and how that played out was very dramatic and traumatic. But it's something that he just like knows and is comfortable with and accepts and uses in, I think, a really positive, really powerful way, because he's very aware of it. But like, yeah, those earlier degrees, it makes perfect sense. Like, you don't remember it. So it
Yeah.
has to be more intuitive. And even if your parents know what happened and they explain it to you, you don't actually remember being in that experience.
Yeah. And then also you're trying to um integrate that as a child's mind
Yeah.
into an adult's understanding, which, isn't possible. What you might have experienced might not be anything to you today, but back then that was such a different thing to occur. How you, took that in, and felt those emotions, who knows? So
Yeah.
that's the thing.
That's a good point. The worldview
So
of a 1 year old is very different than a worldview of like an 18-year-old.
yeah, exactly. So, and interestingly, oh, well, I'll come to that. Melanie Reinhardt has a good theory as well about that, coming up on the healing cycle here. But like, transits will activate the healing and growth, and as we, move through our life or whatever, it has a healing cycle through aspects made through the full orbit. Like I said, 49 to 50 years. And the opposition is really kind of the awakener to the wound. So it's like it occurs between, well, age 13 to 37, which is quite dependent on the length of the orb, transit between each signs, because some of them are longer than others. It can happen earlier or later. But that kind of, brings that to the fore, in that it's, you realize your vulnerability, or maybe you've had other occurrences of it, or things like that can show up for you. So it's kind of starting to question the purpose, and lead you into your Uranus and Saturn opposition more gently. And this is kind of a theme with Chiron, it seems, with working through the energy. If you're purposely working through it, that it can kind of make things easier with those midlife transits, or trigger those midlife transits to be more difficult for you. Okay. So the most significant one then is the Chiron return, and that happens around age 49 to 51, and it brings that full cycle around. And it's a difficult time period coming up to that time, because you have those transits of Uranus and Saturn oppositions where you have got that going on, and that can be a bit more, reassessing things after your Saturn return. And then with Uranus opposition, sure, anything could happen. It's kind of looking at that, changing things up and what's going to happen. But Melanie Reinhardt, who is like an expert on Chiron since it was discovered, she's done a lot of studies on that, and I found it really interesting that she stated that the year prior to the Chiron return is similar to the gestational year. And a lot of healing can occur in that year, and a lot of things can come up. And she made this really interesting suggestion that it's because it's for women, it's at the time of menopause. And she said she had done studies to show that women who had had healing practices for self-care and worked through that Chiron process had actively had less symptoms of menopause. Now, I don't know if that's true or how that works out, but I've had quite a lot of, which is what sparked my interest in Chiron more, a lot of clients in the last couple of years who have had their Chiron return. They've either just gone through it or they're currently going through it. And the ones that had like kind of really taken on board their healing process and recognized it and worked through it, they seem to have had a much easier time. And other people had kind of actively not recognized it or didn't want to work through it. They were having a much more difficult time and challenging time. And I kind of noticed that, and it matched up with what Melanie Reinhardt had said, not necessarily with the menopause symptoms, because I didn't get into that with them or anything, but with their circumstances and how things were playing out for them and other challenges in life or whatever. So I don't know if you've had any experience of that, Heather.
No, that's actually the first I've heard of this, but it makes a lot of sense because that Chiron return happens around age 50. And,
Yeah.
that's when women start like perimenopause and menopause and all those types of things. So, I mean, that would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Mm. It'd be interesting to kind of take note, and see how it plays out.
Yeah.
It'll be sooner for me than you. So yeah, I was just looking at Chiron and Aries, where it currently is. This chart is a few days old, so we're obviously at a different stage now in it, but it's currently at 18 degrees, and it's going to stay there for another little while before it moves into Taurus in 2027. But people with Chiron and Aries are going to be experiencing, a lot of these things coming up for them and that need to be healed over the next couple of years. And some people have been going through and have had their Chiron return already over the last couple of years. And like I mentioned earlier, Chiron and Aries is the wound of the self, and it can show up in different ways, but it usually, over the full cycle and you work through that, it shows up as a lack of self-worth and self-denial. So that's so different to what an Aries energy usually is. It's like the opposite to that energy. Aries is usually able to take action and put themselves out there, and not deny themselves or whatever. So it's more of a feeling like they must please other people in order to be wanted or needed or accepted, and maybe not standing up for themselves or having a lack of focus of who they really are. And that's kind of what needs to be healed. And it can create self-sabotage and acting in deference to other people or living vicariously through people. And then in other ways, it can become like an over-exaggerated energy of bravado to overcompensate outwardly to kind of hide those vulnerabilities. And healing this then is a cycle, and that has to be done by standing up for yourself and by finding your limits and recognizing your self-worth through inner work and self-belief. And that brings that sovereignty that we mentioned earlier, and a gift of agency and self-love and integrity. And that's kind of bring that self-worth together, and then helping other people then going forward in order to show them, how they can stand up for themselves, or maybe advocacy in some way, depending on the house that it's in, for that, in that sense then. So that's the Chiron and Aries that's occurring right now. Do you have anything to add or anything?
Not really. I mean, this is pretty
No.
comprehensive. And
Okay.
yeah, I think that for those who are having Chiron and Aries, like in their birth chart and having their Chiron return, just having this information will be helpful because knowing where you're coming from, like this is what you're
Yeah,
returning to, and this is what you're going to be dealing with kind of in this phase of the cycle. You're coming full circle with your Chiron wound, and this is when you get to integrate it.
exactly. Yeah. And these might be the things that are coming up in the years coming up to your Chiron return. And even though you may have had this throughout your life at different times in different ways, because it's going to show up at different times, um, and manifest in different ways in events and things like that. This is, what's been unearthed in order to heal that, and probably more so at that time. And Jupiter has just been in Chiron too, so, or sorry, in Aries too, so that
Yeah.
probably accelerated that quite a lot for people. Okay, so I have a little demonstration, and I chose Gwyneth Paltrow. I thought, oh, you couldn't write this stuff. It was so interesting how it showed up for her Chiron return. It was brilliant when I looked at it. So her exact return was the 31st of March, and it was in Aries. So it was 31st of March this year, and it was in her second house of wealth and values and how you make your money. And on the 30th of March, literally the day before her exact return, she won her legal battle, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. That was very much publicized this year. It was a legal battle where she was accused of injuring a man in a skiing collision, and she was found not liable for the accident. So she was found like she didn't have to pay the amount of money that he was wanting to sue her for. And I thought it was quite interesting looking at the transits here, because Jupiter and the Sun are on either side of transit in Chiron, and supporting those finances and how she makes her money. And also her values were upheld because she was shown to be compassionate towards the man. It was quite shown quite a lot all over the media, where she went over to him at the end and said, "I wish you well." So it was kind of like she was showing compassion and she was showing her values there. I mean, I know there's mixed reviews, so whichever way you take it, that's what was kind of shown from it, like. So yeah, and looking at it, the media reported that her brand increased, followers were increased from her poise during the trial and from how she conducted herself and held herself. And I know she came from a place of privilege as a child, so I don't know what their situation was or whatever, but it was her value system maybe that's changed over the years. She was an actress, and now she has her income is now based on this value system. She has a brand that's all about wellness and lifestyle and self-care, well-being, having balance in life, and very focused on health and looking after yourself. So I think that's quite indicative of Chiron and Aries. It's like, caring for the body, caring for yourself, looking after your emotions and things like that. So I thought that was really interesting that that's now how she makes her money, you know, in this Chiron return.
Well, and that's so interesting too that the lawsuit was about like an accident, like a health issue,
Yeah,
like a traumatic health
yeah,
experience. And Chiron is in her second house, so that just adds another layer to it.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, based on his injuries and that kind of thing. And then she was found like she won that battle, she won that case.
You could
Um,
almost speculate. I mean, I don't know, and I know very little about this case and Gwyneth Paltrow as a human being, but you
yeah,
could almost speculate that with her Chiron in the second house placement, and growing up, with wealth and with money, that she might have felt some sort of discomfort with that, or awkwardness around it, or shame around it, even. And like maybe this is a
maybe,
coming
yeah.
to terms with it, where it's like, you have to come for full circle and you have to kind of deal with it. And it's like, yes, I have all of this money, but I'm not necessarily liable for this specific situation. I'm not going to be taken advantage of. Or maybe her family was taken advantage of, like at an early age.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Who knows? And it could be that, she's trying to show her groundedness and her that she's not looking for money in this respect either, that she's not out to take, because I think her countersuit was for $1. So it was she was trying to show her integrity as opposed to looking for money from the man that was suing her, but she countersued in that situation as well. So
Oh,
that's
that's
another
interesting.
side of it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of it then. I just had a look at I'm just going to move this over here. I had a look at the transits just in the chart there. So, like I said, it's trining her natal midheaven as well in the 10th house of public reputation. So it still has that supportive action to her public reputation and how people saw her with this Chiron return. So and that was quite positive in that sense. And the ruler, Mars, of the second house is in the 7th house of open enemies. So it's like we could see that play out there. And it's opposed, and she has a stellium in Libra in the 8th house, and Mercury and Uranus are in orb there. And the case was very unusual. It was like who, like he said she hit him, he said she hit him, and she said he hit her. So who knows, and it was kind of very unusual the way the whole thing came up. But yeah, and she was successful. So the 8th house literally being of, finance, or, sums of money that you gain or lose, through whatever, but she was successful in this case. And then it's in sextile to her natal Icy, her moon, and Saturn in the 4th house, and trining to her natal 6th house, which is legal battles, and Venus being money and, representing that kind of thing. So I thought that was quite supportive, both financially and emotionally. Saturn and her moon there in the 4th house too, it was supportive in that sense. Who knows how she experienced it emotionally, and how that affected her. And not just that situation, that was literally just coming up to it. I mean, obviously it's a journey and it's going on for a little while before, so who knows what way that was. But it looks like maybe through her value system, through the work she's been doing, based on Melanie's suggestion of, having a much more positive Chiron return, that if you've done that healing journey, that then this does work out a little bit more beneficially or more positive for you. So that's kind of what I was hoping to show with regards to this demonstration, that, it did actually work out quite well for her in this sense. And that's my presentation. I hope people got something from it and enjoyed it. And obviously there's a lot more to go into for your Chiron. There's a lot more to delve into, but it's just an overview to kind of give people an idea of how this can help, move through this journey in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys want to learn more about your Chiron, there's 3 ways that you guys can do this. Actually, you can join us in the Cosmic Academy of Astrology, because we cover this in depth, along with everything that you need in order to give accurate astrology readings, to make predictions, and to do so with confidence. And you'll have the support of myself, Jen, who is wonderful as a teaching assistant, answering your questions and supporting you throughout the entire process. And we also have another teaching assistant as well, who helps you and, guides you through. We also have, for those who maybe are already a little bit more experienced and know how to give readings, know how to make predictions, I did a 2-hour webinar all about Chiron in the birth chart.
Yeah.
And so I'll link that down below. That is another option. Or if you're not wanting to learn astrology, but you just want to understand your own natal Chiron placement, I highly recommend getting a reading with Jen. She'll walk you through that and everything else in your birth chart. And that is astrosoulalchemy.com. And I'm going to post that link down below. Follow her on Instagram for some really beautiful astrology insights too. And yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for being here and for doing this with me.
Thanks a million for having me. I appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, definitely have to do it again. And
Yeah.
yeah, in the meantime, we'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.